Hello everyone! Welcome to the stream. My name is Katie Montgomery. I am an internet dickhead and today we are here to look at the LGB Alliance conference, which is very exciting. So for anyone who doesn't know, LGB Alliance are an anti-trans hate group that tries to masquerade as not LGBT rights group, but an LGB rights group, which is basically we fight for the rights of gay people, bisexual people, and lesbians, but not trans people or anyone else usually included when you say LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBTQ+, etc. So that usually includes trans people, asexual people, intersex people. There's a whole list of people. The idea for the acronym is to just include as many people who are oppressed by patriarchy in non-standard male-female ways all into one place. But yeah, so LGB Alliance are one of the most prominent gender critical groups in the UK because they have a lot of money, apparently. They put on this massive conference, they've rented out a really big place. They have loads of expensive branding, loads of different stalls and stuff. Then it's kind of just the same people that go to all the gender critical events. You see the photos, and honestly, I feel like from the photos I've seen, I recognise 10% of them. Apparently this year, so this was their second ever conference, and apparently this year they had 600 people go, which is, I mean, it's not loads. It's kind of depressing that there's that many people who are willing to spend money, because you have to pay for tickets, and they're not cheap. Spend money to go to this hate conference to just hear people saying conspiracy theories they got on Twitter at each other. But I guess that's what some people want to do. I think the whole point of this conference is to look legitimate. It's everyone who goes is already indoctrinated. No one's learning anything new there really, apart from they might get some politicians to go, or they might get some journalists to go, and who will be wooed by how fancy it is and how good the branding is. And then they might think, oh, this position's more legitimate, I'll listen to them, especially if they're already inclined to oppose trans rights or, well, all LGBT rights. Last year, if you followed my channel for a while, which you should all do, last year I interviewed Jen Ives, who is a comedian and trans woman who went undercover at the last LGB Alliance conference, and she outed herself to someone who then flipped out and basically done a hate crime. Yeah, it was a bit of a scene. Last year they had Andy No, who's a Proud Boy journalist, and they had some other anti-trans hate incident. Apparently, 3 trans people went last year, and 2 of them had hate incidents. Bad times. But this year there didn't seem to be any major incidents. Also, last year we had gender critical underground, extreme even for gender critical, a well-known name, but not one of the big thought leaders. Julia Long said that trans people don't even exist, and also there are no good trans people, and there was a big round of applause and stuff. Didn't really have that this year. I think the most extreme thing that I've seen coming from the conference, which I don't know if it was said at the conference or just afterwards in a quote or beforehand in a quote, was one of the founders saying that there's no such thing as gay kids, which is pretty disgusting. But I could ramble off about LGB Alliance and how bullshit they are for a long time, because there's a lot to say. But someone I know went undercover this year to the conference and managed to get basically every single flyer from every single stand, which is pretty incredible, and has very kindly uploaded them all into one handy document with some descriptions of what was going on at the stalls and the conversations they had. And I thought we could go through it, because I had a quick look. Most of these I haven't read. So maybe, I feel like this is a skeptics channel. So, I spent some time with the ACA channels on YouTube and The Line and some other channels. And the key is skepticism. And most of the call-in shows I do, the point is you could change my mind. So maybe we're about to read some of these LGB Alliance flyers that I've never seen before, and they're going to convert me, maybe you, the viewer, to being an LGB Alliance fan, to being gender critical, maybe even to being anti-trans. Maybe even I will detransition live on air. It's all possible tonight, and that's what's exciting about these flyers. But also, the ones I have seen have been cringe as shit, and maybe we can just all have a together at how cringe they are. But yeah, these I presume these are like in order of encountering them. I'm not sure. There is some order. There is a lot. We'll skim through some of them. We'll look at some of the text, address some of the arguments maybe. Yeah, should be a good time. So let's get into it, because otherwise the stream will go on forever. If you would like to ask any questions or anything, then you're welcome to. At the end, if you tag me in, I will look if I've got some time for questions. If you do a super chat, then hopefully this time I can get all of the super chats up and just read them out straight away without faffing around too much. Yeah, just if you would like to. But let's get into it. So, this was the first flyer I have been shown, and like we can look at this one in a bit more detail than some of the others. Like, they've obviously, I mean, anyone can pay for flyers, but you're paying for full color, like laminated quality flyers. You know, they're kind of decent. This isn't just like print out A4 paper and use one of those things you used to cut things at school where it's like a ruler with a pizza wheel on it. But this is from Female Online, an app for GC women which will exclude trans women. There will be a version for men too, I presume Male Online. I asked how they would exclude trans people, and she told me there were ways. Very ominous. I asked if it would be something like a birth certificate, and she said that was one of the ways. So there is a gender critical app already called Giggle. Forgot what it's called then. And it's run by an Australian lady, and it uses some kind of face AI technology to see if it decides whether you're a woman or not, and it basically just is as good as any of the other AI face reading apps, which if you've ever spent any time at all playing around with them is kind of garbage. Obviously it just lets trans women in, because it probably just looks for things like, do you have lipstick? Some cis women don't get let in, some cis men with beards and, you know, all the things that gender criticals usually go on about get in. But anyway, this is another one. Apparently they're considering birth certificate. I mean, do they want you to send in your original birth certificate or just upload a picture, in which case, like, it's not proof of ID, it's not a legal document in that sense. So anyway, there are ways. So this is from CanSG. Healthcare professionals. Ugh. It's always really grim finding out that there are GPs who are gender critical. It just kind of makes me feel really unsafe. And I mean, I do worry that one of my GPs is, because she just completely fights me on every healthcare thing ever. And none of the other doctors I've ever encountered seem to do so. Network of healthcare professionals, including doctors, nurses. Yeah, that's also really grim. Just imagine if you were like on a hospital ward surviving some major surgery or something, and you had some gender critical nurse who refused to even like call you your name, or had to keep inserting their conspiracy theory views or whatever and making a big fuss. It'd be pretty garbage. I wouldn't trust them to give me equal healthcare at all. There's no way a gender critical person is going to be able to treat a trans person like a human, like everyone else. I mean, you see how they interact with us online. Pretty grim. Our aims are to enhance professional and public understanding of the nature of sex, gender roles and identity, respect to medicine and healthcare. So usually when gender critical people say this, one of their things they always say is like sex, not gender or whatever. What they're saying when they bring up that phrase, and especially talking about healthcare, is they're making the claim that there are some healthcare things which are affected by your sex, which is true. But when they say that, they don't mean which is affected by sex characteristics. They don't mean, oh yeah, some medical conditions are different depending on what your hormone levels are, or some medical conditions are different depending on what your chromosomes are. Some are different depending on which genes have turned on and off because of which stage in puberty or, you know, menopause or adolescence or whatever you're at. They just mean the letter on your birth certificate determines your care, which is really coarse and not good for anyone, not even cis people. But it's particularly bad for trans people because you end up in situations where like they will not give trans women breast cancer screenings is like the most obvious example because men don't need them. And you have an M on your original birth certificate, so therefore you're not getting this healthcare. But there are loads of other things, like heart attack symptoms are different between men and women, and hormones play a major factor in that. So if they're going around telling people to treat trans women like men when it comes to healthcare, that is just really bad for us. I mean, it's already bad that they just treat us like cis people at all, because our medical condition is just different. And there's just no studies on it. So they just put us closest to whichever cis person fits your hormone profile and stuff closest. But if they're going to go around insisting that it's the one that's on your birth certificate, that will just be bad news for everyone. Join our campaign, sign up to a GoFundMe. What a surprise. Promote free and respectable discourse. They always say this. This is like a real right-wing thing to do, is to constantly be like, we're promoting dialogue, we're promoting free discourse, respectful discourse. When they say respectful, they're not going to respect you as a trans person or, you know, a cis person who loves trans people. They're not going to respect you at all. They're going to call you the wrong thing. They're going to talk down to you. They're going to say that your concerns are made up. They're going to accuse you of lying, say you can't experience, you know, misogyny, all these other things. What they mean is they're not going to say the word fuck. So when they say, no, you shouldn't have healthcare, you're a man, you're a danger to women, and you're like, fuck off, they'll be like, oh, we wanted respectful discourse, actually. And that's usually what they mean. And that's how they do the little pretend we're better than you kind of thing. These these made me laugh. So this is Lisa Keogh, lisakeo.org. Given these stickers and told to stick them on doors of toilets. If you scan the link, it takes you straight to a screen that says they might be trying to scam you. Good stuff. Right. We should have a count. I should have set up a counter for unnecessary references to genitals. Women have vaginas, don't they? Yeah, lots of them do. And not even all cis women, I mean, to be clear. But I guess they wanted their own spin on, like, women don't have a penis, or only men, only women, I was going to say only men have a uterus. Only women have a uterus, the things they like to say. And so they were like, oh, well, has anyone done have women have vaginas? Don't they? Yeah, some of them do. So what's this? This is Keep Prison Single Sex, which seems to be a group and a meme and a culty thing that you put on the end of your Twitter username. So what we've got here. Did you know that male prisoners are held in women's prison? Or is it, did you know that's right, women's prisons are actually mixed sex? Right, so this is a claim that lots of gender critical people are making. That in order to be single sex, you have to exclude all trans people. And therefore, the UK has never had single sex spaces ever. Like, that's a real assertion that they often make. Because trans women, like, for example, toilets, trans women have always used women's toilets. So that means, according to gender critical ideology, there have always, in the whole history of, like, UK toilets, been cis women and trans women, so males and females in the same thing. So therefore, all facilities are mixed sex. However, they will then say mixed sex facilities are more dangerous than single sex and provide evidence comparing the two. But how could you compare the two? Like, we've never had single sex facilities according to you, according to your own ideology. So how can we compare them? It doesn't really make any sense. Anyway, the Ministry of Justice allows male prisoners who identify as trans. They will never say trans people. They only ever say people who identify as trans because they want to make it seem like, you know, people who identify, I don't know, what they want to make it seem like a religion or just like, you know, people who identify as football fans or something. They don't want to make it seem like gay person, tall person, old person. They don't want it to be a characteristic. It needs to be some kind of opt-in thing. It's similar to like gay as a choice. People who choose to be gay or people who identify as homosexual or whatever. The Ministry of Justice does allow trans women, so do some decoding male prisoners who identify as transgender, because most people in prison are there for non-violent offences. Most prisoners aren't a danger to each other, but trans women are in significant danger in men's prisons. Over half of all trans women who get put in men's prisons are raped or sexually assaulted, which is fucking horrific. And some of them multiple times for years. There was some story on the BBC a while ago before it, like 10 years ago, before it went super transphobic, saying that some women have been raped thousands of times. And there was a case recently where one trans woman was raped 14 times in a men's prison. Like, it's fucking grim. Of course they have to put them in there. It's about risk management. The whole point is that sometimes there are prisoners who are dangerous and you need to do a special thing with them. Like, that's just a fact. Sometimes prisoners are so incredibly dangerous that it's very difficult to deal with them. I'm not an expert on prisons and how to deal with incredibly dangerous prisoners, but that's not most people. People go to prison for dealing cannabis or for not paying taxes or, for things which you could say were still crimes and still deserving of prison time if that's your kind of thing. And other people would say that maybe they should, if you're caught dealing drugs, then maybe it's a societal issue that should be solved with some other services, whatever. The point is that those prisoners, there's no reason why they are a danger. They don't need to be in some high security prison. And in these cases, when you put trans women, a single trans woman in with a load of men, it is a danger. But when you put a single trans woman in with a load of cis women, it isn't. I mean, that's just observably true. And that's why any risk analysis of the situation where you want to minimize the risk to all of the prisoners, that is the conclusion you will come to regardless of belief, regardless of whether you think trans women are men or women. If you were just looking at prisoner risk profiles, you would end up with a situation where at least some trans women were in women's prisons and at least some were in high danger, high security or whatever, along with some other people. And it's easy. It's easier with trans people because there's so few trans criminals. I mean, in the whole of the UK, there's like 120 something trans criminals on record, which it's probably not all of them because they don't record whether people are trans or not unless they're, unless there's an issue and they're there for a long time to record them. We don't really have statistics on this, but there aren't many trans prisoners, even if trans people were double represented in prison, which 125, by the way, is a number I got from Fair Play for Women, who are an anti-trans group, and it suggests trans people commit crime or go to prison much less than cis people. And given that they're an oppressed minority, you would actually expect it to be the other way around. So I don't know. But even if they were double represented to what cis people were, you could still just do it all case by case because there's so few of them. Anyway, so we think this is wrong. So they say a recent legal case found that despite the impact on women in prison, I mean, it's a flyer. So, and they have actually sourced it. So maybe we should look up those sources before rolling our eyes. But I mean, with lots of this stuff, the claim is just it is potentially dangerous to have trans women near cis women. That's the claim. They're not going to be bringing statistics. When they do bring statistics, it's stuff like the Fair Play for Women number I just mentioned, where they're like, 50% of all trans prisoners are sex criminals. And it's like, oh, where did you get your data from? And they're like, well, we don't actually record how many trans prisoners we have, but we've got this number 125. It's like, well, maybe the only ones they record as trans are the ones who are in there for a long time, so they find out their needs and they know they need to sort out their healthcare rather than people who are just in there for like 6 months or whatever. Anyway. An obvious prison risk assessment results in trans women in women's prisons because that's the only sensible thing to do unless you're ideologically driven and want to sort people by birth certificate, which isn't a good reason on its own. My position, which you may or may not like, my position is we should be sorting people in order to make people safe and not based on some garbage ideology. Anyway, excluding female offenders in policy and practice, how the Scottish Prison Service overlooks sex-based needs of women. Well, I mean, maybe if you're a feminist group, you would be arguing that we shouldn't be putting women in prisons anyway. Especially seeing as the majority of sexual assaults in prisons happen because of prison guards, not other prisoners. But, you know, who cares about that? You're not actually interested in that in the slightest. You're here to enforce your ideology. Oh, there's a lot of writing here. There's going to be a lot of writing. I wasn't sure whether I was going to read all this out. I might just skim some bits and like highlight a thing. Like we're on. There's a lot of flies to go. There's some good ones. There is some good ones. There are some ones. It's long been accepted that female prisoners exhibit pattern of exceptional vulnerability. As such, their needs are recognised as distinct from the male offenders. I mean, that's true for trans women, obviously, too. I mean, trivially. Female-only trauma response services are recommended as key to enabling women in prison to have the best chance of lasting rehabilitation. Yeah. I mean, repeated exposure to male violence, including sexual violence, is common within the female prison population. Yeah, it's something like a third of all women in their lifetimes will experience sexual assault, and that's higher when it intersects with other things. For example, women of colour have higher rates, and particularly poor and homeless women, are much more likely to. And that's even more true of both trans women and trans men, who are both more likely than all cis people to be sexually assaulted. Over half of trans women are sexually assaulted or raped in their lifetimes. Sexually assaulted in their lifetimes, which is horrific. And that, all of these things, they talk about the difference between men and women on average, which, seeing as there are so few trans people, we don't affect the averages. And then they just declare that must apply to trans men and women, but the other way around to what actually does. Obviously trans women don't experience repeated exposure to male violence, including sexual violence. Like, what are you talking about? Of course we do. Which any statistics at all would show you. But yeah, it's just a campaign to not look at the evidence. Oh, we got a little reference to Stonewall up here. Not look at the actual evidence of what trans people face, but instead to replace it with just like an extrapolation. It's like, well, we've got all the dots on here for cis men, and if we just assume that trans women are just the same, we can draw this line. It's like, well, you can't assume that. You can't assume that for anything to do with trans people, because like we're different. That's kind of the key thing. That's why we're targeted for oppression in a way that cis people aren't. Anyway, it says documents show that Scottish Trans Alliance and Stonewall Scotland have been an active involvement in the Scottish prison service that includes delivering mandatory officer training. That's good. It's actually good to teach people how to interact with LGBT people. The reason they've mentioned this is because they're turning all of the LGBT organizations into like this evil. I mean, this is kind of the whole point in LGB Alliance, but they're trying to turn them into this like evil, shadowy puppet organization. Like, oh, Stonewall talked to you. Well, then no wonder you don't want trans people's rights to be taken away. They're just trying to, turn them into this kind of evil force, and to get rid of all the influence that they have. Because they do not like LGBT people. How police forces in England and Wales record suspects, sex in crime, and independent reporting. Now, it is worth noting that they will talk about how to record, trans women and trans men as in data for like men's and women's statistics. And that's obviously the more contentious part of it. It's easier for there to be an argument about that in the media and in politics. But whenever you look at what they're advocating, for example, the WDI declaration, which LGB Alliance have signed, says that they want to record all trans people, criminals, and victims of crime as their birth sex. And the reason we keep these crime statistics is so we can measure patterns. Like, if we keep crime statistics on the number of people who are sexually assaulted, we would see that women are be more likely to be sexually assaulted, and we'd also see that men are more likely to be sexually assaulting. And that means we can then be like, oh, well, what would reduce that? Why is it men doing it more? Oh, well, maybe sex education would reduce that. Oh, look at that. Other countries have had sex education and it has caused it to reduce. And then we can make these big policy decisions based on that data. So it is useful data to collect. But if it's a way of, you can look at the sexual assaults between different groups, and then maybe you see one that's more than the other, and you can be that's a societal force. Perhaps this is the cause of misogyny or other forces. And if you're recording trans women who are, over half of them experience some form of sexual violence in their life, almost always from cis men, and you're like, oh, well, we're just going to record them as men, then for some reason you've got this one group of men which are just completely disproportionately affected by it is misogynistic violence, but you can't record it as misogynistic violence because that statistic is now just hidden from the data set that you're looking at. And that's why it's garbage to do that. I mean, that's the whole point. Their whole argument is it conceals the reality of the situation. If you have a trans woman who sexually assaults a cis woman, then, maybe misogyny is part of the force driving this. So if we hide that, then we won't be able to see the data. But then they argue the exact opposite when it comes to victims of crime. And trans people are significantly more likely to be the victims of crime than cis people are, and significantly more likely to be the victims of crime than they are to be causing crimes. So it's kind of like a, what about this 125 people over here? Let's have a big argument about it. And then let's ignore the literally tens of thousands of trans people who experience crimes, and just, hide all of the data that affects them, mess up the entire statistics for this vulnerable population that we should be studying in order to minimize transphobia. No, disgusting. Man, I'm renting off on these. I hope we can get through them all. Sex registered at birth is a powerful predictor of outcomes in almost every dimension of social life for cis people. I mean, there's just one of these classic things where if you don't collect all the data and you just collect some of the data and you make conclusions on it and then you extrapolate it to the whole data, your model can easily just be wrong. And that's just what we see here. If they say, oh, well, 99% of the time is a really good social predictor. It's like, well, what's the other 1%? Who is that? If you split this into two groups, the 99% and the 1%, and then you treat them as totally separate data sets and look at the predictions again, does the 1% is it just random? Is this all just statistical noise? Or does it have its own pattern within? Is its own pattern similar to the 99% pattern, but just reduced or changed? Or is it completely flipped up the other way? Or is it a completely different, but really strongly predictable pattern? Well, with trans people, they just don't want to do that. And you see that whenever they're arguing about sports, they're always like, well, men are stronger than women. It's like, well, when you're talking about this, the studies you're showing me only have cis people. You're only talking about cis people. You're specifically not talking about people who've gone through medical transition. And it's the same with this. You're saying, oh yeah, sex registered at birth is a good predictor. Yeah, it is a good predictor for cis people. Very frustrating. And it's a little sleight of hand that you can get away with if people don't really understand statistics and they don't really understand trans people. 22 forces record gender identity, with 20 doing so on the basis of self-declaration. How could you possibly record gender identity without it being self-declaration? I mean, what, someone's just been like, yeah, you look a bit trans to me, mate. Oh, dunno, man wearing a skirt, you must be trans. Scottish, mate. Sharp. 17 forces answered specific questions on how rape suspects' sex is recorded. 14 record gender identity, with over 50% doing so on the basis of self-declaration. Yeah, it does seem a bit random which police forces do what. They don't officially record whether someone is trans or not. That's not official requirement, but perhaps some police forces do. But I know that in general, until the most recent government, till the Boris Johnson government, the third most recent, the one we had 3 weeks ago, the police were recording based on self-ID since 2011. But I think they'd send out a new thing to not do that. But this is just a case where it's just going to be down to how the policeman reads you, unless they have the policy of, are you are you a man or a woman? And then you say, no, I'm non-binary or whatever. You say, yeah, I'm a woman. The other option is the policeman just kind of guesses, because I mean, they're not going to get hold of your birth certificate, are they? And if you tell him one thing and he decides the other thing, then either he's going to be like, oh yeah, not everyone necessarily looks what they are, or he's just going to be like, oh, I don't know, love, think you're a bloke. And then maybe it's a trans woman or maybe it's a cis woman, and then they just get recorded wrong. Because, people have prejudices based on looks, and it's not just for trans people. Cis people lose out for this too. I mean, there are probably more gender non-conforming cis women than there are trans women in the country anyway. Don't think I've seen data on that, but I mean, that seems reasonable to me. A reasonable assumption. One that we should at least consider as possibly being true before we make sweeping generalizations about how populations and how changes in policy are going to affect them. Female offenders have a right to single-sex prisons. Female detainees, it's data on offending must be recorded by sex. Like, lots of this just kind of comes across that you would think if it was like, right, we're a group that wants to make things fair or safe or better for women in prison. And maybe, that's fair. You could say, oh, we want to do it for all people, but maybe you want to specifically focus because it's a feminist group and there will be different issues affecting women in prison and the reasons why they got there. You would think they would have a bunch of facts about 40% of women who go to prison at one point lived on the streets or something. Some kind of, that's a made up statistic, by the way. I don't actually know. But maybe that could have been in the flyer. Maybe if you actually cared about this rather than just enforcing the ideology onto people. Female detainees should only be searched by other females, other female people. They love using female as a noun. Them and incels and absolutely no one else. Search in. I mean, it's a decent flyer, I guess. It's a bit bland. Needs some more percentages and a pie chart. Sex registered at birth is fundamental to analysing offending and risk. It is in one sense, in that if it was safe to do so, collecting more and more data would be better. If you could collect things like, in the kind of, for a minute, let's just not take any ethical considerations into account. Let's just say we want to look at all the patterns, and maybe from all the patterns we can make the world better. Let's just collect all the data. I mean, that's kind of like what Google and Facebook do. They're just like, oh, we'll just collect data on race, data on religion, age, hair color, eye color, whether one of your parents is Italian, and we'll collect all of this data and we'll draw some conclusions from it. But there's a lot of ethical considerations there as to why that's not necessarily good, which is why lots of trans groups won't campaign for the police to record whether someone's trans or not when reporting a crime against them. Because it can be used in the wrong way. It can be used to victimize people. It can affect their chances of getting their crime dealt with properly by the police because the amount of prejudice in the police force, and it can. There's all kinds of things, and if the data leaks, if they've got this big record of all the people who are trans, bad times. Anyway, let's move on. DBS checks. DBS checks apply to trans people. This is false, by the way. By presenting a new identity, the person can sever a link with existing records held against a previous name. That just isn't true. Like, I can't remember who exactly it was. Someone from DBS, perhaps. I don't know how the system works, but recently spoke up on this and just said this is just nonsense. If someone changes their name, like, it's the same for anyone. If someone changes their name, then you can still see all of their old records if they've committed a crime, if they're a danger to children. That doesn't go away from transitioning. It doesn't go away from having it, doesn't go away when getting a GRC. They just update your records. Like, that's the whole point in a GRC. Or it was the original point in the GRC, was to just update all the records. Mandatory use of national insurance numbers for DBS checks. Not heard that argument before. That's interesting. I'll have to look up that one. There's more of these. Flipping heck. Many people may think it incongruous and inappropriate that a prisoner of masculine physique What does that mean? Loads of cis women have a masculine physique. Loads of cis men don't. And with male genitalia. So wait, what happens if they have a feminine physique and male genitalia? Is that fine? What physique do I have? Should be accommodated in a female prison in any circumstances. Maybe it's from watching grim American prison dramas or whatever. But like, there isn't really a necessity why prisoners have to see each other's genitals. That feels like kind of keeping them in subhuman conditions. Like, why do they need to? Why do genitals need to be enforced onto people? If someone's getting their genitals out and waving them at the other prisoners, then maybe they shouldn't be in the minimum security part. Maybe they're a nuisance to others. Maybe there's lots of things to consider, but most prisoners aren't going to do that. And I'm pretty sure that most prisons aren't going to want to show their genitals to other people. It just feels like demeaning to make. I mean, I've seen Orange is the New Black where they all have to shower together. Why? It just doesn't seem necessary. Then again, I'm not someone who sorts people into prisons, and neither are this group. So, Lord Justice Holyrood. I mean, that doesn't really mean anything, that crime. It might seem incongruous. I mean, literally does seem incongruous to some people, because that's what gender critical is all about, isn't it? Toilets matter! I mean, they really do. One of the worst things I thought about Paris was when I needed a wee, there was just no fucking toilets anywhere. I remember like running up to the Louvre and then getting there, and it was a Tuesday and it was just closed, and just being like, oh, why is it fucking closed on a Tuesday? And then running into a shop, like absolutely dying. Like I in my mind, I was just like, what happens if I wet myself in Paris? I just never have to come back here again. Go in, and they had a toilet in some Starbucks or whatever, and they wouldn't let me in until I bought something. Had to buy, like, I was like, what's your cheapest thing? And they were like, whoa. So then I bought an apple juice, and they just ran into the toilet. Very frustrating. But yeah, toilets do matter when you need the toilet, and there should be lots more free public toilets. In Japan, they just have them everywhere. Just free, spotlessly clean toilets that are just nice, and no one's destroyed or shattered on the sink or whatever. There's no reason why we can't have that here. But Sex Matters don't give a shit about that at all. What they do care is about banning me from the women's toilets. For privacy, safety, and dignity, most people prefer separate toilets for men and women. I think I do. But when I'm at like... when I'm at like Starbucks or whatever, because I'm just in the centre of London or something and I just need a wee, I don't really care. It doesn't matter. If it's clean, that's fine. If I'm at a restaurant, I don't care. When I do care is when it's on a night out, for two reasons. One's kind of serious in that I have been chased into the women's toilets before, twice actually. One time by a woman and one time by a man, who were both being really creepy and trying to hit me, and I just didn't really know what to do, and it was a grim story for another time. But also because I feel like the women's toilets is where it all it's where it happens. It's the best place to be. Like, you go in there and it's like someone compliments you on your outfit, and then like you ask them something about their makeup, and then you go off, and then like, hearing all the stories, and someone comes out and there's drama, and then it's like, oh, nice to meet you, here's all my drama, and then it's good times. That's why I like women's toilets. That and they're safer in some situations. For best practice, offer a unisex option. That's good. If this wasn't some dog whistle bullshit and we just took this out of context, this little snippet, it's not bad, is it? Just, we know the underlying context of this group is run by Mayor Forstater and Helen Joyce, who want to ban not just trans women, but trans men too from women's toilets. And they probably see us as an inconvenience for men too. I mean, of course they do. They see us as a huge problem to a sane world. They definitely want to create a world without trans people, and they just don't want us in toilets. And it is weird because toilets are kind of arbitrary thing to gender segregate, because they all have cubicles. So I don't know. I could go off on this. I won't go off on this. But like, why does the segregation start when you walk into a room before you get to the toilet and not once you get to the toilet? Anyway, let's move on. I never went back to the toilet. I mean, that's brave of you. I guess that's why the photo cuts off at the waist. Removing single-sex spaces is not inclusive. I do think that replacing men's and women's facilities for all unisex does feel like a capitalist big company solution to everyone arguing. They're like, oh, we'll just get rid of everything then. Everyone's happy. And it's like, well, is anyone happy now? It would be good if they would add in third options for toilets. So they had men's toilets, women's toilets, I mean, gender neutral or unisex or whatever you want to call them, toilets, or lots of cubicles with individual sinks inside them. That would be a better solution. But of course, Sex Matters, when they say they want a gender neutral one, what they really want is they want a cis women's toilet, a cis men's toilet, and a trans toilet, which is off around the corner on the 4th floor, you know, and they haven't ever cleaned it. That's the situation at best we'd end up with. Similar stuff. Oh, women, if you remove single-sex spaces, many women self-exclude. They will look you in the eye and tell you that if there aren't women's toilets, then women will like not go out or not work at this place or whatever. And then when you say, oh, well, if you ban trans women from the toilet, then it can't participate in society, they'll be like, you can just use the men's. It's like you're well aware of the force for which that is you've already made the counter argument to that just above. And it's even worse because if you make everything unisex, you could argue that it's more dangerous if you had the statistics. I'm not convinced we do, but if we just accept that premise that there are, then if you're making everything unisex, then you're kind of spreading out in a different way to if you just make that 1 in every 1,000 person who is a trans woman go into a room full of men. Like they are not comparable situations. It's like, I think the comparable situation is if you said, and I've started saying this to gender critical people, when you say, you want to ban us from the toilets. And they're like, no, we don't. We just want to ban you from the women's toilets, as if that's like some kind of, little word game complete, they win. But it's exactly the same as if I said, well, I just want just your mum to be banned from the toilets, or just your daughter. Like, you would describe that as banning her from public life. If just your mum was banned from the women's toilets, not her friends, not you, just your mum, and she could use the men's. Like, what are you complaining about? She's not banned from the toilets, just banned from the female toilets. It's just a crappy word game. When I saw this, I cringed so hard. Like, this is there trying to be cool. Cringe with me, please. Cringe is in chat. Do we have a cringe? This is why I need to get on this. I need to get more on streaming. I need like the members thing where we can have a cringe emoji or whatever they are. We'll get there. We'll get there. If anyone knows about them, let me know. I'd like the help on how to set it up. Pretty terrible. Also, they could have said, "May the Force stay to be with you." I don't know. Just would that not been better? They absolutely love this. I think this is like, I think gender critical Christmas is when J.K. Rowling wrote that bullshit tweet that she doesn't believe, that they will go back every day and re-like. See what my previous video on J.K. Rowling like cult, if you don't know what I'm on about. But this is like this is like the Easter. It's the next most important religious event. Was when Maya Forstater won her worthy of respect court case that said, so I mean, it does say it here, and I think it's important to highlight this. In an employment tribunal, judgment confirmed that people who believe that sex is real, immutable, and important are protected against discrimination and harassment at work for those beliefs. If gender critical was just that, that's a little bit different. And that is the bit they got protected. They didn't get that sex is real, that sex is immutable, that sex is important, and I should be allowed to misgender trans people. Or and I should be allowed to campaign at work and say that trans people should be banned from participating in society. Those parts weren't covered. And in fact, one of the strategies of Mayer's team, I think, from looking at what happened, was to pull gender critical back to the least, the most abstract version of it, the least specific, because it's the easiest thing to defend. Like, if someone, well, I mean, 2 out of 3 of those I agree with. I mean, sex is real. It's kind of meaningless. I mean, yes, it's real. And it's important in the fact that, I mean, sex is obviously, like, sex characteristics affect your life. They affect in terms of prejudice and in terms of sexual orientation, and in terms of like your actual just physical body, like bits of your body are, they were important to you. You know, you're a person. But yeah, like, so when you just say those things, it's like, okay, cool, yeah, I'm on board. Those. Sex is immutable. I mean, sex is just sex characteristics, and you can change some of your sex characteristics. That doesn't. I mean, I think that's just factually false. But people believe loads of factually false stuff. I mean, some people are creationists, so, and that's just like, some people are flat earthers. Should you be allowed to fire someone from work just because they're a flat earther? I mean, some flat earthers are anti-Semites, and you should be able to act upon that if they start harassing people. But it's there's a strong overlap actually. But the act of believing the Earth is flat on its own, even though it's trivially false, doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. But if you believe, like, if you like, oh, I believe that sex is, the marriage is between a man and a woman, it's like, well, you know, obviously that's disrespectful. Obviously you're homophobic. But if you're not like shoving that down people's throats, if you're not like telling your gay co-worker that they're not married and being abusive to people, then have your belief, I guess. And that is like in the judgment that she got, it was just compared to that. It's the same as people who think abortion is murder. Like, it's a disgusting misogynistic belief and it's factually false, but unless you start forcing it on people, then who cares, I guess. I mean, I do care, because beliefs inform people's actions and beliefs are important, but you can't go around thought policing, and that would be a bad thing to do for a number of reasons. But then that doesn't sum up Maya Forseta's beliefs. I mean, that's just like the most abstract, unimportant part of it. The fact that she's like campaigning to take away all trans people's rights is that's what makes someone gender critical, and that's what subsequent flyers mention. And this one's kind of specific, but the rest, you know, oh, remember when Maya Forstater protected my ability to abuse people in the toilet? It's like, no, she didn't. You've extrapolated that. And now this is a gender critical hate machine. I forgot this one. So I think looking at what they worry about is quite telling. Like, if you ask trans people, what are you most concerned with? Like, the things they're going to probably say are their healthcare. You know, lots of them are going to say where they can live, how they can pay rent, how they can pay for food, and not being attacked on the street. Those kind of things, you know, serious things that you need in order to just live a life, full stop, at all, that all people should get and all people need, and to be respected as a person. Gender critical people, like, they say they worry about, you know, single sex prisons and stuff, but I mean, I don't think they really care, but it's not something that affects them directly, and it's kind of one of the little sub arguments. It's one of their roots in to cause, you know, fear mongering. What they do go on about a lot is pronouns, and they have this like, oh, what happens if someone asks your pronouns? It's like, stay calm, breathe, deep breaths. Let's go through what you need to do if someone does a pronoun. Like, do not panic. Do not panic. What happens? Do I have to state my pronouns at work? No. Oh, thank God. Oh, I was gonna start crying then when I heard someone ask me what my pronouns are. It's just so pathetic. Like, you're worried about having to use zero effort to give someone some mild respect and interact with them like a human, and you need like multiple flyers on how to deal with a situation where someone's like, oh, what's your pronouns? And you're like, huh? No! Like, okay. You could just be like, oh yeah, I'm a woman, she, please. Like, okay. Who cares? It really doesn't affect you at all. But this really stresses them out. I think it's one of their major issues. They get some real problems. Now this is interesting. So this is the Sex Matters one, and Sex Matters is one of the biggest gender critical groups, along with LGB Alliance. And to be fair to them, they haven't lied much in these flyers. You don't have to state your pronouns at work. That is true. If you don't want to, you can just say. And look, the simplest. I endorse this message. What should I say if I don't want to? The simplest thing to do is politely decline. Yeah. Just be like, oh, I don't want to give my pronouns. And the other person can be like, I will assume they, them for you then, I guess. And then if you care enough, you can correct them. I mean, yeah. If this is really a big deal to you, if you're really that pathetic, if you're that privileged, this is one of your major issues, who cares? And then goes on to say, do I have to use other people's preferred pronouns? It depends. It might be a reasonable expectation to refer to colleagues and customers with the pronouns and title they prefer, or at least use their name instead. Using someone's name is definitely rude and disrespectful. Like, instead of pronouns, when they're like, Katie said this and Katie did that, and then Katie thought that Katie, like, it's obviously pathetic and it stands out straight away that you're doing it. But it is a reasonable expectation to refer to colleagues. And it's interesting because this is like the legal truth of it. You can't just go around misgendering trans people. You will get in trouble for that. And her ruling thing obviously didn't protect that because it's harassment. And it is reasonable in the legal sense and also reasonable in like social normal person interaction sense. But they'll say it depends, whatever. But that isn't what the people behind who the figureheads of Sex Matters are saying. They don't want that to be the case. They're not acknowledging the law here, because this is like how you survive in a current legal landscape until gender critical authoritarianism is the law. Because like loads of them are just saying openly, oh, I've stopped referring to trans people by their pronouns, and they have this big argument. And sometimes, they'll screenshot my tweet or whatever and say about it, and one of them will be like, oh, I don't like Katie, she's really annoying, and then it'll be like, she, how dare you, and like they get a pylon just for calling me she. So it's important to know the context here, because you could present this and be like, Katie, you're overreacting. The Sex Matters flyers aren't that bad, and they aren't. Like, we haven't clicked on any of the links, and without reading into, I mean, the fucking may the force stay with you. That was probably the worst one so far. But like, they're not that bad on the surface until you look at the actions of the people behind this, and the goals of the movement and what their dog whistles mean. Is when it kind of comes out. But there are worse flyers here. Transgender Trend are absolutely awful, horrible group. I mean, it does terrify me when they're coming for my rights, but I think it's true for everyone. When they go for kids' rights, it's just disgusting. Conversion therapy is truly evil, and anyone fighting to keep it legal, like LGB Alliance, can fuck off. Yeah, blah blah blah, standard. So what is this one? I saw this on the way past. Sorry. Right by the microphone, making a disgusting sniff sound. Child and adolescent's trans identity, the tip of the iceberg. Da, da, da. So what do we have here? We have trans identity. That is not the first thing. Like, this is obviously from the perspective of a parent who isn't read by their child as safe enough to be normal around. If coming out is the first you learn of it, maybe there's a lot of reasons, but I think if you're gender critical, there's going to be one main reason why coming out is the first you learn of it, and it's because they do not trust you. When a child or adolescent declares a trans identity, that's such a gender critical phrase. They mean comes out. That's what, when you declare your gay identity, I am declaring. I'm declaring a trans identity. Many see this as the end point. No, they really do not. What are you talking about? A simple declaration of an internal state. I mean, that's true. But too often the background circumstances which have led to this conclusion are overshadowed by immediate affirmation. God, get over yourself. Fucking hell. It's like, it's just so self-centered to think that when someone's like, oh, by the way, I'm bisexual. By the way, I'm a trans person. For you to be like, immediate affirmation, I don't think so. I won't be responding to you in any change. It's like, fucking get over yourself. My God, it's just so pathetic. Yes, someone's finally built up the courage, especially if it's a kid, has finally built up the courage to tell you about something they've been struggling with for most of their life. And you're just like, well, I'm not going to believe you. I know better than you because I am gender critical and I don't believe in science. Social transition, requesting a name and pronoun change, clothing and hairstyles, and requesting to use facilities designed for the opposite sex. I mean, it's interesting that they know the difference between social and medical transition here, because they don't seem to when they're campaigning against trans healthcare. Mental health, emerging personality disorder. What the fuck are you on about? Yeah, so this depression and anxiety, trauma, self-harm, suicidal behavior, that's really strongly linked to this first point, in that if you don't treat them with respect and believe them when they describe who they are, then all of this stuff starts happening. And there's a lot of science which shows there's quite a correlation between that, and it's quite strong. So interesting you left that link out. Sexuality, lesbian, gay, bisexual, internalized homophobia, homophobic peers or family, homophobic bullying. Is this meant to be like, oh, what they're trying to do here is just say that all trans kids are actually gay, cis gay people. They love to make that link between being gay, being trans, and gender non-conforming, all three things just one in the same. Uninterested in any kind of evidence. I'm glad they explained to LGB Alliance what sexuality was. Yeah, this is just the classic, loads of people are really homophobic but aren't transphobic argument, which is just plainly false for anyone who's ever interacted with a human before. Neurodevelopment, autism, ADHD, those are two things that aren't, I mean, autistic people are more likely to be LGBT and LGBT people are more likely to be autistic. There's an interesting correlation between those two. And it's not just trans people, it's true of all LGBT people. I think that is interesting. But of course, when I find that out, I'm like, oh, that's cool. Wonder if there's a developmental thing which affects both of them. And when gender critical people hear it, they're like, that gives me an excuse to not do this first thing and accept someone as LGBT and cause them to do this thing over here, feel depressed and anxious, because I can then say, oh, well, you're just autistic. Because autistic people can't know themselves, they can't know their own sexual orientation, they can't know their own gender identity, they can't be trusted around themselves, and therefore it's now my new excuse, and that's why I am going to cause my child to be depressed and anxious. Safeguarding issues. They're just like saying things like radicalization, binders and tucking, illegal hormones. Illegal. They're like going up to someone, sorry, that's it. Your hormones are illegal. We're extracting these. The government is seizing your hormones from your body. And they just get a big suck all your hormones out for a syringe. They're just like, this is like a gender critical word board of things that they just do the Charlie Day meme and link together. Just saying stuff now. Bullying. Yeah. Who's bullying trans people, huh? It's the people at this conference. Oh, adoption of foster care. That's interesting. They're just claiming that becoming fostered it makes you trans, I guess. That's what they're going for here. Puberty, social influence. they follow me on Twitter, they'll get transdomate. Body discomfort, sexual relationship, education, identity formation, periods. Yeah, just a list of stuff, really, isn't it? Not really sure why. I mean, I know why they've put it in here, and it does come under the category of puberty. And there's the implication here is that periods aren't very nice, and it might cause a cis girl to be like, oh, I wish I was a man so I didn't have periods, and then therefore just suddenly becomes trans overnight, and especially if they've got ADHD or whatever. But like to just like sneak it in here with no explanation. 80% of trans kids are bullied. That is a very believable statistic. So the implication from Gender Criticals is, no, send a survey of our members. Nah. You don't have a load of trans members. Fuck off. I would... What is this group? Okay, I need to look up Bayswater support. So they're saying, I wonder if this is what that this is like a parents group who are saying about their kids. 80% have been bullied. I mean, that's believable. About half are gay or lesbian. That's believable for trans kids. 75% autism or ADHD. I don't know. Don't know where this statistics come from. Anyway, all I was going to say is, who's fucking bullying them, mate? It's you. Some little cool pictures here. That's the female symbol with like a male hat. It's interesting. Weird logos. Look after yourself. Help your child live a good life. That would be good. But if you're gender critical, then that is not your goal. Has your child come out as trans? It's interesting they didn't write claimed a trans identity. Yeah, it's a parents group. There you go. This is obviously going to be a survey of the parents. There's no way this is a survey of the trans kids. They don't do surveys on trans kids. Yeah, wary of medical solutions. We've got some tips. What are we saying? Okay. We are not halfway through. Maybe I'll speed up. Maybe I don't need to go into all of these details. Tell you what. Let me know in chat. What are you saying? Do I need to do a part 2 of this when I get to halfway in a short while? Or should I skip through and go a bit faster? Or should we just do a fucking monster stream? What do you say? Let me know in chat. I'm going to have a drink and I'll see what people say. I want to... Maybe, what happens if I click this button? I'm just going to try this. This might be really fucking annoying. Who knows what that did? Clicked a button. I don't know if people watched an advert then. Maybe just watch me drink. I think people are voting for part 2. Oh, people are voting for Monster Stream. Do a poll, yeah. How do I do a poll? Can the mods do a poll? I'll keep going for a few more minutes and then we'll see what the poll result is. So what we've got to say here. What should you do? Top 10 tips when your child says you're trans. Listen to your child. Yes, you should absolutely do that. At first, listen, your child is telling you something important and meaningful to them. That's good advice, actually. Despite your internal emotions, try to remain calm. Ask questions and don't be confrontational. You're the grown-up. I mean, that's pretty decent. Inform yourself. They may have, yeah. They may have researched it before. Where's the bit where you're going to say, don't do it? You can be seriously misled online. I mean, that's kind of true. Make sure your child is accessing... Make sure that, yeah, this is like a controlling your kid from visiting LGBT support groups, isn't it? I mean, they're not very blatant about it, so I'll give them that. But certainly groups like Transgender Trend often recommend cutting off internet access. for trans kids. I mean, like you see some of these people boasting online that they've stopped their kid having friends and stopped them watching any media at all. It just sounds so bleak. Absolutely horrific. Encourage the school to recognise the complexity and uncertainty around the subject of trans identity. Here you go. Work in your little weaselly nonsense. They may not be experts in the identity formation of your child. I mean, that's true. Ask them to work with you in determining the best interests of your child based on the most up-to-date evidence. And that's not really what you want at an LGB Alliance conference, though, is it? Because the most up-to-date evidence is exactly what you don't like, which is supporting trans kids. The trans identity may be accompanied by a rapid succession of requests for a new name of pronouns. Pursue medical transition. Take time to consider where your limits. Why should you have limits? You should be doing what's best for your child, and why should your limits? What does that even mean? Social transition may close down options, entrenching a belief that may naturally resolve itself with maturity. Let's talk about sex and gender. Yeah, blah blah blah. I didn't really need to read this one in that much detail. It's not horrific. It's just more the context of being at LGB Alliance conference where they're calling to remove all trans rights. Pre-existing issues such as bullying, trauma, emerging same-sex attraction, and neurodiversity. Address these factors first. Like this is like one of the gender critical like strategies. I mean, this is kind of like seem mild and sneak in what you really want rather than just outwardly declaring it, but when pressured, take a certain position. It was like, oh, no, all we want to do, we just want to make sure, we've got to, if children are being bullied, then we need to address that first. It's like, what does first mean? Like, how do you address autism first before someone coming out as LGBT? What they're really trying to say is, the reason your kid is LGBT is because of these list of things, because they were bullied, because they were sexually assaulted, because they're neurodivergent. And it's the same thing they were saying about gay kids 30 years ago, or even just 15 years ago. Like the idea that you can become trans from being bullied, or you can become trans from being autistic, or you can become trans from being neurodivergent, and then that can be cured, and that's the real thing. You're not really trans, you're just autistic. And it's just a really disgusting way to look at both being trans and autistic. Because they are separate things. Even if they do correlate, that doesn't mean that one causes the other. I mean, it would be just as sensible to say like, oh, you're autistic. Are you sure it isn't just because you're trans? Like, that's the same level of bullshit going on here. And that's what they want to do. And they want to kind of hide that. And if you said that, if it's like, if I was going around and be like, oh, you think your kid's autistic? Maybe they're just trans. Maybe you should just, force them to consider being trans first. Gender criticals would be horrified at that. I mean, kind of rightly so, but it works both ways round. Preparing for the long term. Oh, I can see this is going to be bad already. A trans identity can last anywhere from a few months to several years or more. Fuck off. It's just such fucking garbage. They're just saying being trans is a phase, being gay is a phase. It's the exact same bullshit. When they say affirmation, they mean just supporting your kid. That's what it means. Like, oh, avoid being nice to your own child. Remember, the adolescent brain isn't fully developed until age 24. That gives you an excuse to start bullying your 19-year-old adult son. Help your child live a good life. Oh, that would be good if that's what you were doing. Help your child focus on a good life in the real world rather than online where gender may dominate. Gender only dominates online because it's the only place they get to express themselves, because at home you won't let them. If you just let trans kids just be themselves, then it's not a major aspect of their life. unless they get bullied at school because you've stopped the school teaching about LGBT issues, or unless they're not allowed to have hobbies because you've caused all trans kids to be banned from all sport and after school activities. If you just let them, I mean, there's a point John Oliver made recently. Abigail Schreier, who's some right-wing nutjob, gender critical person, said that trans people don't have hobbies. And he's like, well, maybe that's because every time they try and get hobbies like sport, you ban them. And it's kind of true. Like, why would I be even doing this fucking YouTube channel? Why would any of you know who I was or care at all if it wasn't for the fact that I was fighting for trans people's rights and you watching also or care about that? Like, or you're hate watching. Shout out to the hate watchers. Why would it be a thing? It's like, it would make us, like, people don't have, like, blue eyes, societies, and spend the whole time arguing on Twitter about having blue eyes because no one oppresses them for it. No one gives a fucking shit. And it's just the same with being trans. Like, it just wouldn't be a thing. It would be like oh, I'm coming out. And everyone's like, oh, okay, cool. What's your new name and pronouns? Oh, okay, cool. And then, like, sometime later, you'd be like, oh, I'm doing medicine. And obviously, you know, starting medication might be a thing you talk about, but I don't even think all my friends know I'm asthmatic. And that's, like, just another medication I take. It's just, like, rubbish. Oh, the conference flyer. Right. Let's see. I can't, from my current YouTube view, see the poll result. Before we go into the conference flyer, I'm just going to look and see if we have a poll question result. Let's just make sure I've definitely muted this before I start watching my own video to see what the poll says. Do we have one? Oh, maybe it's not even there. Did we have a poll? I don't even know how to do them. Let me know. Oh, 64 in favor of a monster stream. God, why? How could you all do that to me? Oh, straw poll. Okay. Let's see what it says. Oh God. Okay, right. We'll keep going for a little bit. We'll see what happens. Let's at least get through this. And I might ignore the poll result and do a two-parter anyway. So, LGB Alliance Conference 22. Some front cover people here. There's interesting that the first photo on the front of your like prospectus flyer thingy is a lady who was so notoriously homophobic that in the 80s the lesbian Avengers like broke onto her garden and had a picnic to protest against how homophobic she was, who still opposes same-sex marriage and who still opposes gay people being able to adopt. Like, and that's just someone on your front cover. Baroness Nicholson. I think that's who that is. Hopefully I'm not wrong. I recognise this dude too. He's a bit weird, to be honest. But yeah, what we got here, Managing Director Kate Barker. Inspiring team. Oh, it kind of like kind of makes me feel like grim when they describe LGB Alliance as inspiring, because what are you inspiring people to do? I mean, what has LGB Alliance done? Like, compared trans and intersex people to bestiality, you know, campaigned to keep conversion therapy, including against gay people, legal, attacked Stonewall, who are like the biggest, most successful LGBT charity in Europe, who are like saving people from Afghanistan and stuff, and lost in court and wasted a load of people's time, and nothing else. And the only other thing you've done is create support in politics for taking away my human rights. Like, why are people inspired to do that? It's just disgusting. It's really horrible watching them use this language for, like, you know, we're inspired to treat this group of people as subhuman. Isn't that exciting? Glad you could get all here together. Everyone's so joyous. Oh, there's so much joy in the room. Oh, trans people are subhuman. Oh, doesn't it just make you feel so joyous? So who's this? Eileen Gallagher. Oh, don't know who she is. There's always new people to find out about. Usually when you're like, oh, I don't know who this person is, and you Google them and it's like, have a history of voting against and campaigning against gay rights. And you're like, oh, okay. Good stuff. Oh, it does look like she is lesbian, gay or bisexual though. So that's not guaranteed at LGB Alliance. What else have we got here? Got some wine. Party. Everyone loves the LGB Alliance disco, which opens at 5:30 p.m. Very exciting. Oh, it kicks off at 6:30 p.m. That's when it gets late. It's going to be a good time. There was some cringe videos of the dancing coming out from that. What else we got here? Does it mention anywhere that they want to ban research into trans people getting pregnant or record trans women who are raped as men? I wonder what this QR code goes to now. Zoom in and scan it if you like. So we've got some. Oh yeah, I was looking at these people. I mean, this isn't that interesting apart from Bev Jackson appears in every single box. Got several lords on the team, which is pretty demoralising. They've all got. Oh, does Kate Barker not have a Twitter? That's interesting. And this is interesting. So, I mean, they've got the OG crew. They've got Joanna Cherry. They've got Kathleen Stock. They've got reduced. So Kathleen Stocks is the collateral damage. If gender non-conforming women lose out, then that's an acceptable loss. I can't remember the exact quote. Got Helen Joyce. We need to reduce the number of trans people because they're a problem to a sane world. Regurgitating Jennifer Bilek conspiracy theories. Julie Bindel, Rosie Duffield. Like got some big names here. Dr. Az Hakim, who's an absolutely disgusting person. We got James Esses, who did my favourite tweet of the whole LGBT Alliance thing this time round when he was like, as a straight man who spoke at LGBT Alliance. I was like, yeah, I wonder why they invited you, mate. It's just ridiculous. Richie Herron. Oh, God. Some such fucking garbage people. Shara Ali's part of the Green Party. And he just said straight up he wants to close down the healthcare provider that I use. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do if you shut down? Like, I need this medicine to live. It's not just my mental health would be seriously affected if I was denied this medicine, but also my physical health would be seriously affected too. Like, what is your plan here? What would I do? And he didn't reply, but then other people started replying to me being like, yeah, you're a man, and he just started liking people's tweets. I don't think he liked one saying, yeah, you're a man, but he was obviously reading all of the replies to me. And like some other people were like, oh, why are you so self-centered, narcissistic? And then he was like, in those kind of things. And like, why am I self-centered and narcissistic about my healthcare? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Absolute Darvo. Like, just such garbage people. Like, presented as if they're all like nice and, oh, it's just a politician. Oh, he just cares about the environment. He just cares about creating a world where trans people can't get healthcare. Just horrible. Some grim people. What a lineup, huh? Stuff. The disco. Lol. Got there's is that Kate Barker and wait, which ones are these? Yeah. Kate Harris and Bev Jackson. They're like, oh, maybe, I don't know. Whatever. Surprised they didn't have a trans person on the front to try and make them look more legitimate. They can do that next week. Gay Men's Network. So I think this is run by Mr. I Preferred AIDS to Trans Rights. Grim. Yeah. So let's see what their manifesto says. We advance the rights of homosexual men to live free from persecution and discrimination. Good. Agreed. I'm on board so far. We assert our rights as homosexuals on the basis of our sex and being same-sex attracted. Dog whistle, gender critical land, where no one would really talk like that unless they were gender critical and they want to say the word sex in 3 times in the same sentence. What they really want to say here is, we don't want trans men to be able to call themselves gay men. And also, by the same logic, but we're never going to say this out loud, we think that the men who are attracted to trans women are gay. Like, they'll often say, oh, you're forcing us to, like, trans people are forcing gay men to be attracted to breasts and vaginas and stuff, which isn't what anyone who I interact with every single day says at all, and that's a hardline anti-trans rights position, because everyone should be able to describe their own sexuality. It's like a key part of it. But then they'll say that gay men and bisexual men are the ones who are attracted to trans women rather than straight men and bisexual men, which then is asserting that gay men can be attracted to people with breasts and vaginas. So it's like a complete, like none of the LGB Alliance positions obviously are consistent if you just literally take them and extend them to their logical conclusions. And this is what they're saying with this. There's a tweet one time where I said, same-sex attracted has become a dog whistle, because when they're saying same-sex attracted, they don't mean, oh yeah, two men who are attracted to each other. They mean sexuality is defined purely by your sex recorded at birth, which is usually just based on your genitals as a child. And obviously that's not the case, because sexual orientation is based on what you can actually sense about someone, their actual sex characteristics. And you know, that's just the reality of it. Like humans use their senses. This is just so basic, it seems stupid to say out loud. People use their sight and their smell and their hearing and things which are part of how your sexual orientation works. And they don't use things like chromosome detection or gamete potential detection, because there's not a sense you have. There's no way you can know that from looking at someone. So it isn't part of your innate sexual orientation. But when they say this phrase, not when everyone says it. I mean, if someone who's not gender critical is the same sex attracted to me, then yeah, that's cool. Doesn't mean it, you know, that's just how dog whistles work. They don't always mean the bad thing. If someone's like, oh, you know, I think all people's lives matter, you'd be like, oh yeah, cool. But if they're like saying it in the context of Black Lives Matter, then they're a racist. Like, that's how these things work. And it's the same with this. And when they're saying sex 3 times in the same sentence in the LGB Alliance conference, what they're really talking about is saying trans women are men, which then doesn't actually fit into, well, real life or even how they would describe sexuality, because it's not a consistent position to hold. Anyway, number 3, we will ensure that our voices as gay men are heard in public and political discussions affecting our lives. Seems legit. 4, we defend our right to speak about ourselves and our experiences in plain sex-based language. If you want to speak about yourself, mate, that is fine. I mean, I think that's kind of what trans people want to be able to do. It's a shame that you're campaigning against that. We defend our right to single-sex, male-only spaces and events. And this, of course, means no trans people. Because, like, when they say single-sex and they're like, oh, no, actually, we include trans men when we talk about females. They don't. Like, Mayor Forster has actually been honest about this, and I think so has Helen Joyce, that when they say women's spaces, single-sex spaces, they mean no trans women, but they also mean no trans men, because they are aware of the reality that, you know, trans men, lots of trans men just fit in the same as cis men. So when they say male-only spaces, they mean no trans men, but they also mean no trans women. Like, as if imagine if they did like a gay men's night, and then I turned up. They won't want me there. Like, why would I? Like, it's just ridiculous. Even though really, because of my birth sex, which is how sexuality magically works, some of the men there should be attracted to me, but obviously they wouldn't be. And I should be allowed in, but obviously they won't let me in. So it's just nonsense. It's just about excluding trans people. When they say these things, they're trying to, if they said our event is for cis people only, or our event is no trans people, then everyone would know it's prejudice bullshit. So they try and find a way to say that without saying it. That's the whole point of this. I mean, it's just obvious. They know they're doing it. We know they're doing it. People watching know they're doing it. But it gives them this kind of way of pretending, and it does confuse people. You know, loads of people don't understand all the internal LGBT dynamics. Like, oh, why would a gay person hate a trans person? I don't understand that. And that's like the kind of the whole point in all this stuff. We will fight attempts for identities and language to be stolen or co-opted. And this is one, I was pointing this out the other day. they go on and on about how trans people just need identities validated. Oh, you're just all about identities. And it's so projection. Like, they really care about their identity and not letting other people have it. And like, I care about my own identity, in that if you tell me I'm someone who I'm not, then it can be upsetting. But I don't care if someone, like, I'm a metalhead, and I know metalheads sometimes get offended when, like, someone who doesn't really like real metal says they're a metalhead, but, like, it doesn't actually matter. If some kid is like, I love, like, Black Veil Brides and Linkin Park and, like, stuff, and I'm a metalhead, I'll be like, it doesn't affect me. Who cares? You have to be so insecure in your identity in order for that to affect you. And some people are insecure in their identities, and that's how this comes across. And it was like, oh, trans people need their identity validating. It's like, no, I just need you to talk to me like a human and use my real name and respect me like everyone else. But you somehow are offended and feel invalidated by the fact that some trans men call themselves gay. You don't have to be attracted to them. You don't have to have sex with them. They're just describing the reality of their lives, and you're offended by it, even though it doesn't affect you. And it's even one of your points. We defend our right to speak about ourselves and our experiences, but not for other people. Like, that's all trans people are doing. When I say I've experienced misogyny, this isn't some, like, I don't know, act. I mean, of course they would say that it's all some big act, and I like to experience misogyny, and that's, you know, what was I wearing? I deserved it, and that's what I wanted all along and stuff. But the reality is, sometimes I experience misogyny, and it's fucking horrible, and I want to talk about it. And that is the basis for trans people using the words that we do. And their basis for using the words they do is specifically to, like, attack trans people's identity because they feel insecure about it. Such nonsense. We will work to support gay male detransitioners. I mean, I doubt that. I doubt that any gender critical person really wants to support detransitioners. They just want to use them as a political tool. We engage with law and policymakers. That is grim. I mean, they do. It's one of the things that gender critical is good at. I mean, I guess it's because we have a far-right government at the moment, who's going to obviously be very ready to listen to gender critical people. So that means they have more political influence than they would. But they are good at it. I mean, we've all seen the photos from the conference. They are generally a lot older. And older people usually get into politics more. And they have more money. And so they're good at this kind of thing. And it's kind of scary. That's why we need all these big organizations to advocate for us. And it's why they attack them so much. Because, you know, generally LGBT people are younger demographic, and certainly activists for LGBT rights are. But yeah, so that's a bit grim, isn't it? And responding to Wix regarding the infamous no LGBT without the it's so funny what little things become like gender critical like memes and pieces of law. Like, every gender critical person who read that flyer either knew exactly what that meant or turned to the person next to them and got told about it. Like, what? The Wix flow? Oh, the Wix, you should have seen the Wix flow. The Wix flow. And it was because Wix is a DIY company in the UK. I mean, maybe they're in other countries. And they went to Pride. You know, sometimes companies do Pride marches and their staff, like, go down the street. And they had a banner that said no LGBT without the T, which is just a fairly common slogan. Loads of groups have that. But there was a photo posted of it onto Twitter, and it kind of blew up the gender critical space. I presume probably Gremlin had probably posted about it on his blog 15 times. And now that's become one of their things. So when they think of the phrase no LGBT without the T, they think of Wix. That's like a thing to them, like a, you know, a combination. Whereas, I mean, I've been seeing that banner ever since I came out as trans. I've seen other companies say it. Like, it's just, but never caught on. It didn't, like, spiral into one of their, like, meme things. And now they talk about it because it's like, what? It's an evidence. It's evidence that gay people aren't allowed to hate trans people. The Wix. We're never shopping at Wix again. We're never buying an innocent smoothie again. We're never going to get margarine from any company again. They've got their little things. It would be a good study. Someone should study the like memology of gender critical. Like, if you can find out, I'm pretty sure it's Graham Linehan, but the first person to decide that I had cheek implants. So it's a good little gender critical meme. You know instantly whether someone is a fucking cultist or not when they say one of these things. Like, if as soon as they start talking about the Wix Pride float, you know they have absolutely lost their brain on Twitter. Probably including me, to be honest. Promote the positive message that homosexuality is normal. That is a good message to promote. It's a shame that you don't seem to be able to do it without saying that you preferred AIDS to trans rights. You disgusting person. I think it is the guy, Dennis Kavanagh, behind this. Maybe amongst others. Absolute fucking loser. My goodness. Just like saying that is so. It's hard to know what it's more like, more homophobic or more transphobic. It's just such a vile thing to say. Just said it without care, and then J.K. Rowling was like, "Hooray, you're back!" And anyway, so I'm doing this fucking memology bullshit as well. It's terrible. It rots your brain going on Twitter. So we have now been going an hour and a half, and I think there's still good stuff to do on this. And I think my voice will give out before we get to the end. Let's call it here. And I'll take some questions now. And if you really like the stream and you're watching it back or you're watching it now live, if you'd like this and you would like me to do a part 2, then please write as a comment underneath. And if we get some likes and stuff and people are excited, then I will do a part 2. Because we are halfway through the flyers. Maybe you're just like, this is just some fucking woman talking about flyers and not really. If you don't like it, then also let me know, and then I won't waste my time doing a second part. But I don't know. I'm quite enjoying just ranting and learning some stuff. It is interesting seeing. I mean, it's interesting seeing how extreme. I know some of the later on flyers are a bit more blatant about what they want, but it is interesting seeing them presenting, like, who is their target audience for this? Because most people there, presumably already gender critical cultist types, that they can't be selling this to many new people who aren't politicians or journalists. So I guess they want to keep the tone not super extreme. And also, I mean, to be honest, if they had a flyer that said, we want to ban trans people from public spaces, then someone would get hold of it and someone would do a YouTube video about it, and then it'd blow up and it'd be in the news. Well, it wouldn't be in the mainstream British news, who would never criticise gender critical, but it'd be in Pink News. It'd be in 1 or 2 news organisations. It'd be in trans rights, you know. But yeah, I don't know. It seems. I mean, they're doing all their gender critical argument stuff here for sure. But it's just interesting seeing the tone that they're going for. So anyway, let us do some questions, and then we can potentially do a part 2. We've got Lesbian Labour's one. We've got LGBT Liberal Forum, who posted a picture. So it's called Liberal Voice for Women. And then there was a picture of just a man sat on his own on the stand. That was pretty good. We've got Conservative. This one was a little bit more extreme. Did you know self-ID allows any man to declare himself as a woman? We got more prison stuff. 4 Women Scott, who are pretty grim. James Esses wrote an entire fucking book with 16 pages that he is very he likes himself as a person. Let's just put it like that. Got another booklet thing here. We got some good stuff. We got some Welsh here. Maybe I'll learn how to say this in Welsh next time. Let's see. There is good stuff to come if you want a part 2. But let's do some questions. Let's see what we've got. I don't know why I'm doing that weird accent over and over again. So, I should find out where I can see the super chats again. If someone could link me, that would be great. I seem to have lost the tab. But let's look at a couple of questions while that loads up. Jadu79 says, do you think your new Prime Minister will be better or worse than before? Well, so we've had 3 Prime Ministers so far this year. So there's still some time. We might get a 4th in. I mean, we genuinely might, who knows? But Boris was fucking awful for the country and for trans people. Liz Truss was obviously very bad for the country. She absolutely tanked the pound and, you know, big macro stuff. She caused some real damage to the country. I mean, so did Boris, really, but slower. Liz Truss did it so quickly that it just really stands out as being terrible. But she, although she was kind of in charge when they decided not to reform the Gender Recognition Act in England and Wales, I think that it wasn't really like her frontline thing. She wasn't leading the culture war. I think when the Conservatives switched from Boris, they were like, because Boris was all about culture war. Like he was kind of doing a British version of Trump thing. And I think they were like, right, we're going to do less culture war and we're going to focus on like conservative economics. And that has tanked so badly. And in the leadership competition, which resulted in Liz Truss getting in charge, Rishi Sunak really went hard on anti-trans stuff. Like, so he's obviously trying to do culture war. And I think Liz Truss and her team were hoping that if you just did tax cuts, people would be a bit richer at the end of the month and they'll be like, oh, well, whatever else happens, I don't care. But Rishi Sunak is probably going to do austerity instead of cutting taxes, which means people will be poor at the end of the month. So they will notice that and they will be fucking angry unless you do a culture war. And then there'll be loads of gender critical people being like, oh, well, yeah, sure. Like, I'm struggling to eat, but at least the Conservatives know what a woman is, and then they'll vote for them in the general election. And that's probably the strategy. So, I don't know. Perhaps he's all bluff, but perhaps he's going to put Suella Braverman in a key position. And she fucking hates trans people. My God. She's the one who's, like, dreaming of deporting people to Rwanda. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she starts deporting trans people to Rwanda. Like, she is a fucking bleak person, and I don't know, we'll see. But I do feel that Liz Truss was maybe going to go a bit less hard on culture war, and now we're probably back on full steam culture war, so we'll see. What kind of democracy is this? This is a democracy where my voice gives up if I talk for 2 hours solid. You and your poll. I mean, I'm only taking into account the 35% of people who vote for 2 parts. That's what I'm doing. I'm doing like the Conservative Party do. I'm just looking at the 10,000 people I care about, not everyone else. What we got here? Rishi Sunak is the 222nd richest man in the UK. I'm surprised he's that low down, to be honest. But yeah, he's got like $1 billion or whatever. So, oh, Suella Braverman is Home Secretary again. Fuck's sake. Let me see if I can find this link that I should definitely prepare for future. How to look at my received super chats, because I definitely want to read them all out if you have been very kind as to send one. I think it is on here. Supers. Here we go. I have found them on my own. Isn't that exciting? So, the first one was from Stephanie McCalley, who says, if they were told they'd been infiltrated by trans folk, would they run around checking everyone's underpants? I mean, potentially. I mean, well, as we saw, they have ways of knowing that if you're trans or not. So maybe they do. Maybe they have some kind of trans detector that maybe they got some secret sci-fi technology that we don't know about. And that's where they're going. They're just going to do some big reveal at LGB Alliance Conference 2023. They're going to be like, we have the genital X-ray. We're just going to fire these X-rays at your genitals to see if you're safe to go to the toilet. Jotun's says, welcome back to Turf Wars. This isn't a Turf Wars. This could have been a bonus Turf Wars, really. Turf Wars is coming. In fact, our special guest today, I didn't even say that. I was potentially going to have a special guest Not for this one, maybe for part 2. But they're helping out with behind the scenes turf war stuff. I know I've been saying it for a while. It's coming. It's coming. Alyssa says, what's up with them stealing tech terms? With recent Nvidia and AMD chips running hot, I've been seeing talk of TIMS, thermal interface materials. Oh, that's interesting. I know lots of people, when you say AGP, lots of people say, is it accelerated graphics port? I don't know. And Missy Prime says, hashtag Team Katie. Whoops, wrong show. Yes, please, for part 2. Thank you. Very kind of you. So what else do we have here? Do we have any other questions? Have you seen Kemi Badenoch is our new equality minister? Oh, fucking hell, that is going to be... Yeah, we're in... I mean, that's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for anyone. But it's really not going to be good for trans people, and refugees, I think, will probably be the big 2 hit by. I mean, there's like, that's what I mean. They're obviously going on culture war, because Suella Braverman and Kemi Badenoch are like culture war people. They're not conservative economics people. So yeah, it's going to be fucking bleak. I think probably the next build up to the next election is probably going to... This is the worst of it, unless they win the next election. But starting like now, until I think 2024 is the start of 2024 is when they have to call the election. This is probably going to be the absolute worst time for trans people in the UK. I'm kind of scared, to be honest. We'll see. I don't know. We just got to stick together and not give up, and hope that when the next general election rolls around, the culture war people get pushed out. It's not going to be fun. Xanattack says, have we talked about the new draft NHS guidance on gender dysphoria? Yeah, I've seen it. I know that it's fucking grim. It's like they didn't sign any evidence in it. It seems to be just politics stuff, you know, trying to ban trans healthcare, a bit like what the Republicans are doing. I am planning to do a video on it. So there's a consultation. There's a deadline in December. We will hopefully on this channel go through on how to fill this consultation in, and how to deal with it. It's not good. There's lots of not good stuff. I think that probably schools is going to be the next thing they attack. They're going to probably try and do a Section 28. That's probably going to be, you know, with Suella Braverman, Kemi Badenoch, and Rishi Sunak combined, their combined anti-trans forces. You know, we're probably looking at a new Section 28, and them trying to ban healthcare for trans kids. They're like the main things. And maybe if they slam those through really quickly in the first few, 100 days or whatever they always say, then maybe they'll push for a bathroom bill too. Or even try to get rid of the Equality Act. I mean, who knows? Who knows? And now I'm just fear-mongering myself. It's scary times. I don't mean to scare people, but it is not the kind of time where you can just be confident about your future. We'll see. What colour is my nail varnish? Invisible. It's actually bright yellow. Oh, hang on. How do I do this? No, that's the wrong one. Yay! What else do we have here? Do we have any more questions? Oh, Katie, can you plug Student Dr. Ben's fundraiser? Yes, I can. If you know Student Dr. Ben, he is a good friend of mine, and he is raising for transition healthcare, and he's raising some money, and the deadline is this year. So if you would like to go and have a look, it was pinned as a comment for my last video, so please go and check it out. Vela Celine says, hashtag Team Poppy. She's asleep just down here. I would pick her up, but she looks really comfortable. I should get a cat cam. January 20. Oh god, Phoebe says January 2025 is when the next election is. It just goes on forever. Like, what the fuck? How can it be 2025? I thought it was 2024. Man, that is bad times. Phoebe also says, if you were to host a counter conference in the style of LGB Alliance conference, where would you begin? Yeah, I don't know. I have thought about that. I mean, I guess there are LGBT rights conferences. I feel like before I started planning one, I'd have to go and visit some and see what they're like and see what they do well and what they're missing out on. But maybe there should be a trans rights in the UK conference, like a specific. Maybe there is one, and I'm just ignorant. If there is one, please let me know. But if not, then maybe we should organise one. You know, it could be good for morale and to get people together who know what they're talking about and decide where we're going to target, you know, fighting for our rights and stuff. Robin Talstig says, are you the most hated or loved? Oh, are you most hated or loved by the general public? That's a pretty grim thing to think about, isn't it? Well, in my experiences as a real person in the public, pretty much everyone I meet, I get on with. Most people aren't transphobic once they've talked to you for 5 minutes. Don't know if I've met any gender critical people in real life, and if I have, they've managed to not be as horrible to me as they are on the internet. As a trans person, though, in general, when you're a faceless trans person, when it's just like, that is a trans person, I assume most of the public doesn't care. There's probably more people who support you than actively hate you, but the ones who hate you probably hate you a lot more than random members of the public love people they don't know. Don't know. What are the units? But if we have any more questions, I will take them. But if not, then I will wrap up. Oh, we've got a couple more here. Phoebe says, general elections every 5 years plus the election period of 45 days. Yeah, but did we have one in 2020? It's grim. Danny Garden says, is it likely that Alba gains 2 more seats? So for anyone who doesn't know, Alba are like, they're like the culture war far-right party in Scotland. And they got the old leader of the SNP, who was accused of sexual assault or sexual harassment by 5 different women, I think. He's gender critical, of course. And he has support from the gender criticals, of course. And the media was like, whoa, he's going to do really well. And then they got like nothing. They got like no votes at all. It was quite satisfying. Scotland usually does a bit better than England when it comes to not wanting to wipe LGBT people out. So that was quite satisfying. I don't think that they will, I don't think they'll get any votes. Critical Cupcake points out that the LGBT rights conference in the UK was meant to be the one they had called Proud to Be Me. And they had spent a lot of money on that. There was all the big, you know, all set up. All of the big LGBT orgs were going to this thing. It was going to be, it was going to be quite a big deal. But then the government, like just before it, like 3 weeks before or something, announced that they were originally going to ban conversion therapy. And that was like the celebration of this Proud to Be Me thing. Banning the torture of children. And then the government was like, we're not going to do that anymore. And all the LGBT organisations, all unified across the board, pulled out of this conference in protest. And it wasn't called Proud to Be Me, it was called Safe to Be Me, I think. Because then the response was a protest called Not Safe to Be Me. Because the UK government is fucking garbage. We do need a general election. I died of laughter Inc. is correct in chat. Alyssa says, do any of the flyer cover actual LGB stuff rather than anti-trans stuff? Well, to be fair, like half of the points on the Gay Men's Network were kind of like obligatory, we support gay rights stuff. So, you know, some of it, there was a few things I highlighted where it's like, if you take this out of context and forget you're at a conference run by a group which has publicly said that it wants to remove all trans people's rights, then some of us okay. But yeah. Anyway, the last question I will take is from Hive Science, who says, Katie, your website is still seriously lacking on bug content. Are you an enthusiast or not? So maybe I'll post some insect stuff. Maybe I'll do my top 10 insect facts that I've said on Talk Heathen or something as an article. But yeah, thanks for watching part 1, of going through the LGB Alliance conference flyers. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please do like the video and comment saying you want a part 2. If you don't, then I just won't do one, because I'll assume that people aren't that excited. Yeah, if you would like to be notified of when that happens, then you could also subscribe to the channel if you wanted. I'd see that I'm like closing in on 15,000 subscribers. That's quite exciting. But yeah, thank you very much everyone for watching, and we'll see you all next time.